go again. So here we are, Chapter 5, Cadences and Non-Harmonic Tones. Read this paragraph carefully about important concepts. Because it talks about the connection between cadences and chords and non-harmonic tones. And then the next one defines a phrase. So I want you to read that and think about it. And then the harmonic cadence. I want you to read that and think about it and come to class with any questions you may have. Alright, so here's an example of a little excerpt from Scarlatti in D minor. So the phrase is, and it ends with a cadence 5-1. It's not a perfect authentic cadence because D is not in the, well, it could be a perfect authentic cadence because D is in the soprano of the melody. So the perfect authentic cadence is a progression from 5-1 in major keys and 5 to minor 1 in minor keys. Both chords have to be in root position, and the tonic note must be the highest sounding pitch, which it is here. I was just looking at the piano part because that's what I have a tendency to do, but there it is. So the perfect authentic cadence is the highest, strongest cadence of all. Now an imperfect authentic cadence is just a little bit weaker. The highest sounding tone in the tonic could be something other than, in the tonic triad could be something other than the tonic note. Sometimes, and this is important to remember, they might substitute the diminished 7 triad for the 5, so it would be 7-6 to 1 or 7-6 to minor 1. Or one or both of the chords could be inverted. So in figure 5.2, this is a perfect authentic cadence. 5-1 root position, E flat is in the melody. Different ways to do it. Imperfect authentic would be where something other than the E flat is in the melody. Or you've got a 7-1. So this would be a 5 in first inversion going to 1, or a 5 going to first inversion and 1, or 7 in first inversion going to 1, which is rare. A half cadence, if the second chord is a 5, then you're looking at a half cadence. And this allows for a lot of possibilities for a composer to what they might want to do next. Sometimes if you have a half cadence going from minor 4 to 5 in a minor key, they call it a Phrygian half cadence. Just so you know. So here's a half cadence, figure 5.3. 4 to 5. Here's a 2 to 5. Here's a 1 to 5. And here is 4-6 to 5. It has almost got an amen type sound, but not quite. Then your plagal cadence is 4-1. Those are all examples. And then your deceptive cadence goes to 6. Or sometimes 4. So here's a 5 going to 6. It's like, oh, you expect, but then you get that instead. You expect, but you get. And here, going to 4 in first inversion. Phrase endings that contain very characteristic rhythmic patterns that create a rhythmic cadence are called rhythmic cadences. So if you've got it just feels like it's an ending of something. So read that. Now here is an example of some rhythmic cadences. can exist at the rhythmic level alone, independent of the harmony and melody. Drum cadences, for example, are clear examples of that. The history of harmonic cadence is interesting because so many early cadence types sound quaint and unfulfilling now. Before the Baroque period of music, which was 1600 to 1750, and which also was before a true strong establishment of what we call functional harmony, cadences were just a way of manipulating melodic lines that converged or diverged to a point of rest, and usually on the final, which was the first degree of a mode. The following are some typical early cadences. This is the Firenze cadence of 1375, a hot number back then. Guillaume Michaud used this one. He lived in the 1300s as well. Gilles Bachois in the 1400s used something called the Landini cadence, and Landini was a person too. And Palestrina favored the plagal cadence. When you get to the Baroque period, they were trying to do melody with harmony more so than many melodies that did whatever melody. We'll learn that later chapter. So here, Pachelbel, Johann Pachelbel, had at some point used this imperfect authentic cadence. Henry Purcell used this half cadence once upon a time. Georg Friedrich Handel, or George Friedrich Handel, depending on whether he was in Germany or England at the time. And of course, Johann Sebastian Bach. That was a perfect authentic cadence. Mind you, they all used all of these cadences. They're just giving you examples. And then here's an example of a deceptive cadence that apparently Bach used. Bach was very innovative in his use of harmony, I will say. And then going from the Baroque into the classical period, there wasn't a lot of change in the use of cadences. So here's an example by Beethoven of an imperfect authentic cadence. Mozart, a perfect authentic cadence. Haydn, of a deceptive cadence, not that he was a deceptive person. And Antonio Salieri apparently liked a half cadence as well. And cadences continued from the Baroque through the Classical to the Romantic period without too much change. But by the Romantic period, composers were decorating them in a more florid or, embellished manner. By the time you get to the Post-Romantic period and the Impressionistic period, the cadences were sometimes so highly decorated you could hardly tell what they were. And others were more of a clean return to the Baroque, or even before the Baroque, the linear cadences, meaning using melodic lines for the cadences. So people were starting to chafe at the bit of traditional, functional Western European art music, and starting to also, because there was more travel and more exposure to music of other cultures, and people were always interested in trying new things and making a difference in their music and being unique. They started messing with the traditional things. And then during the contemporary period, the whole idea of a cadence formula became nearly extinct. And there's a lot of political and socioeconomic reasons for that. And people who wanted to write atonal music that had no tonal center would often use interpretation marks to bring their compositions to a close. And others just would stop without having any stereotypical cadence. So there's a lot of reasons and theories behind that, and that's a whole world of study in its own. Jazz and popular music still continues for the most part to use traditional cadences, but sometimes especially jazz, will disguise them with chord substitutions and decorations. And sometimes during the last third of the 20th century, jazz artists started adapting some of the contemporary ideas too, with atonality and free tonality and all kinds of stuff. So go ahead and read this and think about it. It's a precursor to what you'll learn in music history. All right, so then here's some decorated authentic cadences. Like here's a 5/11 chord, D, F sharp, A, C, E, G. That's going to a 1 chord with an added 6th. Here's a 5/13 chord. And here is a 5 augmented 7. So you get the feeling of what the jazz is. I'll do a different video for non-harmonic tones.